Mohit Aron, a proven tech founder of two multi-billion-dollar technology companies, Nutanix and Cohesity.
As you are starting to build now, how did you think about technology moats in your current company?
What is a LLM? It's basically intelligence. For the LLM to be effective, it needs tools. And the tools in the age of LLMs is basically APIs. Moats are the depth of what an API can do. People who say that the SaaS is dead is really confusing UI part of the SaaS with the API that the SaaS provides. I think it's a mistake to spend time tuning LLMs. I think if you truly want to penetrate the enterprise, you don't.
Thanks, Mohit, for doing this. I'm really excited to talk to you about this topic of moats in the age of AI. As the guy who has seen almost 20 years of technology shifts, and you are coding every day, you are deep in technology. There's a lot happening in the AI first world where startup founders are told, oh, your technology is a wrapper on top of some AI, or you are a thin UI layer, or you are don't have proprietary data, or you're just, fine-tuning models or whatever, right? So first principles, the topic is how do we think about moats in technology? What will persist in the age of AI? And so how do you, as you are starting to build now, how did you think about technology moats in your current company?
Right.
Let's start from there.
Let me start with drawing an analogy. Let's go back to 3,000 years back when we had cavemen, perhaps. Do we agree that the caveman also had intelligence? The same intelligence we have, that person also had it. So what did the caveman not have? He or she did not have the right tools, right? And so what they could actually do was kind of limited. Now with the LLMs, what is a LLM? It's basically intelligence. So for the LLM to be effective, it needs tools. And the tools in the age of LLMs is basically APIs. The moat in the AI age is actually these APIs. So think about, maybe you want to build something that can maybe an AI agent that can book vacations for you. Unless you have access to a site like Expedia, which becomes the API, well, your agent is not going to just be able to book a vacation, right?
Indeed.
So I think the moats are the depth of what an API can do. That's I think the biggest moat in the age of AI. That mode is not going away. And so I've also heard people talking about SaaS is dead and whatnot. They're really confusing the UI that SaaS offers, right? In the age of AI, when AI agents are going to reach out to a site like Expedia, the UI that Expedia offers may have less value. I mean, it still has value because humans are also going there. But since AI agents are going there, the beauty of the AI of the UI is less important. But the service the API provides is still important, right? And therefore, I don't believe that SaaS is going away. People who say that the SaaS is dead is really confusing UI part of the SaaS with the API that the SaaS provides.
Service, yeah.
That's right.
That's such a clarifying sort of analogy in the caveman and the tools. So, and then if I extend that as you're saying, so the startups need to evaluate the value of their underlying service.
Yes.
SaaS user interface can be a voice interface, can be a chat interface, which is nice moving to, but the sort of value of the underlying service is where it value accrues to eventually.
That is correct.
And and you also talk about ecosystems and which sort of connect to these tools. Talk about that a little bit.
So the next thing I've heard is that, well, what if I vibe code everything? The problem is that the existing service may live in an ecosystem. So there are other people building tools that integrate with you, right? And they will not integrate with this vibe coded thing. So another mode comes from the fact what your ecosystem is, right? Who else interoperates with you? And if there are tons of things that interoperate with you, even if someone were to wipe code something in like a day, that thing, even if it provides the same functionality, very likely it's not going to be able to integrate well with that ecosystem. And so that becomes a mode by itself. The third, I would say, is, let's say, eBay is an example. All the buyers and sellers are there. If you wipe code a clone of eBay, suddenly, the mode from eBay is not going to go away, right?
Right.
Same thing for WhatsApp, or, you can wipe code WhatsApp or a clone of WhatsApp. But given that all of our friends are on WhatsApp, they're not going to start using this vibe coded service. So this is where some of these modes come from.
Makes sense. And maybe even going back to sort of your tool analogy, one thing which we see a lot, like there are workflows which the enterprise user is accustomed to in their day-to-day work. So it could be a hiring workflow or a quality assurance workflow. Those workflows, in my view, have fundamental value. Now, the user interface of those workflows can change. I can engage with voice or chat or something. But when you talk about the value of the underlying tooling, right? Are you talking about workflows as well?
This goes more into that interoperation. So let's say, you're using a ATS, something for recruiting, and that has some workflows. Well, whatever works with it, is used to those workflows. And especially if it's a third-party tool that works with it, that knows that workflow and works with it. So if you try to replace that with a vibe-coded thing, which may not have the same workflow, then these external things will not be able to work well, even if they somehow use the same API, right? And so that itself becomes a moat. So that goes into that interoperability that I was talking about, that ecosystem.
Makes sense. And then moving to the next point, data, right? So now recently I read an announcement from one of the large SaaS companies that they won't let these AI agents leech on their data, right, to build stuff on top. And it talks to your interoperability point as well. Does sort of having proprietary data become a moat? If yes, then will companies build walls around it? Will Salesforce say tomorrow that nobody else can take Slack data or Salesforce data? Or how do you think about data? And and then there's a model training part of data as well. We'll come to that next. But how do you think of the importance of data?
The data is the new oil. Data is always important. But what protects the data sits behind APIs. Basically, if the APIs are closed, well, that becomes a moat. You can't access the data. Like I said, unless you can interoperate with that, you have a moat.
But eventually, do you think, especially given how there are a lot of AI agent companies now, these systems of records will have to, because in one way the customer owns the data, right? Do you think eventually the customer, these big companies, will have to give in to the customer and make it interoperable, or will Salesforce and Workday and ServiceNow make it a point to stop this?
So let us say hypothetically, I think you mentioned Salesforce. Some new company comes and you're able to migrate the Salesforce data to that. And that company also provides that ecosystem, that interoperability. Then, that will be a threat to Salesforce. But unless moving the data is easier, providing that ecosystem is harder. That's right. And that's where the moat comes from.
And then data from a model training perspective, right? Like a lot of enterprises, at least we see in our business, they want their own proprietary LLMs or something fine-tuned to them.
Right.
In the age of AI and context memory for the AI agents themselves, how important do you think will startups and early stage companies should focus on that part of it? Or how big of that importance of data and model?
Anecdotally, it's becoming less and less important.
Okay.
So I've heard so many people just say that, look, just use a off-the-shelf LLM, a vanilla LLM without any fine tuning, and just use basic RAG to make it work. Now, that said, you can improve latencies some by fine tuning and baking in some of the knowledge. But that said, there is always going to be some RAG anyway, because after all, not everything can be taught. There is just new data, right? And so that data needs to be sent as context to the LLM anyway. But you can definitely train it some to improve latencies. But I think we started talking about step one startups. I think it's a mistake to spend time tuning LLMs. I mean, first, just use the vanilla LLMs. Send them the context. I mean, these days, context windows are getting larger and larger. So send them whatever you want to send them in the context. And once your product is mature, somewhat stable, then you can actually work on reducing the latencies by fine-tuning those LLMs. But just don't try to do that too early.
Got it. And so if you are advising somebody who is the early technical team of the step one startup or early stage company, or looking to join, and investors say this often, oh, you're just an AI wrapper on top of an AI service. Your mantra is look at the tooling, look at the underlying value of the service being provided, look at the ecosystem, and look at some of the data interoperability.
That's right. If the, again, going back to the service you provide, which sits behind an API, if that is deep and phenomenal, that's what matters. Right. Look, eventually AI is just tapping into these things and providing some goodness. But the depth comes from what sits behind an API. And if that is good, that's your real moat.
So one related question to that, and this is not for a step one company, but it's from the perspective of like these days a lot of companies are getting funded where they're disrupting a legacy ERP system or a legacy CRM system with an AI first ERP, an AI first CRM, an AI first accounting system. Every top fund has funded company in these categories, and in that way, in your definition, they actually don't have the ecosystem. They're starting off. Their service is very nebulous compared to a NetSuite or something, right? How do these companies compete with the NetSuite, and or who will stay 2 years from now, 3 years from now?
Yeah, so it's a very, very astute observation. Let's take an example. Let's say, I think you mentioned CRM. Let's start with that. Let's say somebody says that I vibe coded a CRM, use my CRM. And then you go to a big customer and the customer says, well, okay, maybe your CRM can do everything that my legacy CRM can do. But I have this big ecosystem that works with my CRM, and that ecosystem doesn't work with you. So that big customer is not going to buy. So now to sell, what you're going to do is you're going to go to a customer which doesn't have that ecosystem. And that customer, more likely than not, is like a small company. So you end up selling to SMB companies. And one thing about go to market is that the selling motion to sell down market is a very different selling motion compared to the selling motion up market. Right, up market you need sales teams, you need a sales guy. Down market you need leverage. You sell through the channel, you sell using inside sales people, you sell through a lot of marketing. And once most of your revenue starts coming down market, your selling motion basically becomes attuned to that. So you can now you become an SMB company. And that's the problem. I think if you truly want to penetrate the enterprise, you don't go that route. You basically, again, it's a time tested thing. You go the route of solving a pain that nobody else can solve, and insert yourself, get a foothold with that. And then over time, you can build, into a ERP system or a CRM system and surround yourself with that ecosystem. But you need an insertion point. You can't just come and one day say that I'm going to replace the CRM. That's madness. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
It is counter, which is great. It is counter to a lot of
It is.
current thinking. Every top fund has, in every category, as I said,
Yeah, they're all in.
which is this is the AI-native ERP and so on. And so your view is that if I just play it out, NetSuite, they're not going away. Workday, NetSuite, in those categories, their GRR is like 97%. It's not going away. These companies will start from SMB. Maybe some of them go up market, but mostly
Very
they
hard.
are
Very hard. Going from SMB to up is very hard.
Yeah.
Just think about it. When you talk to customers, even the requirements the customers impose on you are very different in the SMB world.
Yeah.
Like they want simplicity, they just want something that just works. They don't want any complication. So your whole engineering kind of works like that, and your whole GTM process is attuned to SMB. So the minute you start going up, right, it almost like splits the company into two, because the engineering required in an enterprise company, the sales required is very, very different. Right, so you end up defocusing from the SMB. So there's almost becomes like a magnetic pull down market,
Right.
where you can just go up.
That is really interesting. And this is a area where we started with technology moats, and it links back all the way back to go to market strategy and how to actually think through a company and how to make it work, and market strategy, technology strategy come together.
It does. I think I would even say that sometimes the GTM mode is even more important than the GTM chess is more important than the product chess.
Yes.
But they both need to be played together. You cannot play them in isolation. Right? You cannot build a product for the enterprise, but you sell in the SMB. Right? Now you've built a ton of things that the SMB doesn't need, and maybe your performance is slower than what the SMB needs. Right? So it doesn't work.
And so if you are a CTO, or if you are a tech engineer or technology minded person, you thinking about technical modes is probably 30, 40, 50% of the story. How does that idea translate into a go-to-market mode is perhaps...
You don't think about the go-to-market stuff after the fact. You actually work backwards. You think about what kind of company this is. Okay, it's an enterprise company. Then you think about how is the go-to-market motion going to look like first. Then you back map to, okay, this is how the product thing is going to look like. So you got to think about that, sort of like you think about the end first. Begin with the end in mind, as they say. That's how you got to think about. Well, the big mistake is you build something technically sound. you haven't thought about the go-to-market at all. And then when it comes time to go-to-market, you find yourself selling into the part of the market where the product was never made for that.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
not how you do it.
So would it be fair to summarize, Mohit, your point of view on technology moats in the age of AI? Not much changes. It is a new tool to accelerate how we build software, how we build, and how enterprises or people use software, because ultimately it's about the underlying service, the data. Am I characterizing it fairly?
Mostly correct, but I would say that, look, if two tools are equal,
Yeah.
one offers AI and the other doesn't,
Yeah.
then that
Yeah.
the one that offers AI will
Yeah.
win.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, the fundamentals have not changed.
Yeah, but
Um,
AI will become like AI will be part of every part of a tool.
It
Like,
does.
like from a, as we talked about, the user interface.
Yes.
The underlying intelligence is AI powered. The UI is AI powered. Connectivity across systems, right, will be AI powered. There's like Workato has agentic systems to link these things. So
Yeah.
AI is just a sort of mechanism for every step of what we used to do before.
It's kind of like, you're fighting a war, and suddenly you have a new weapon. And it's a mistake to not have that weapon, because the side that is still using the old weapons will lose, right? So it's just that. But the fundamentals of how you fight wars remain the same,
Yeah.
despite the fact that you have new weapons.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much, Mohit, for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think a lot of people at the earliest stages, as they are thinking about what to build and why and where should I invest in, there's a lot of engineering cycles and a lot of energy and calories are burnt between the investor feedback sessions and founder back and forth on like where should you focus on. I think this will be really clarifying for people to sort of listen to
That's
this.
great.
Appreciate it.